These are challenging times for the Scottish Conservatives. Their vote share plummeted at last year's general election, and Nigel Farage's Reform UK party poses a real electoral threat. Today, leader Russel Findlay made a speech in which he presented his party as the only one that's offering real change to voters in Scotland, a point he developed in an interview with STV's political editor Colin Mackay.
Labour won the general election on the basis of change, and they have changed. They've changed the country for the worse very, very quickly. And I'm quite proud to take that word and use it and run with it, because it's absolutely critical that the SNP are removed from power in 2026. That is the change that Scotland so desperately needs.
Are you ready to deliver that change, given that you just admitted that your party let the country down?
Well, you know, I understand that we need to rebuild trust. I'm not a career politician. I think that's to my benefit. I understand why people feel disconnected from politics and disillusioned with politicians. And I think it's absolutely critical that we proudly champion our common sense Conservative values of aspiration, of lower taxes, and of celebrating success. There is an alternative to the consensus, the set left-wing consensus at Holyrood. We've had 25, going on 26 years of devolution now, where taxes have only ever gone up and public services have only ever got worse.
But the fact that you've let people down, you're admitting that your party has let people down, that's driving your voters to reform, isn't it now?
Well, I can't be personally held to account for the actions of our UK government over a decade and a half.
But you've admitted that they let people down.
Indeed, but that's entirely right. I want to be the kind of politician that will admit when we get things wrong and only tell people things that we can deliver if we can do so, not make fantasy promises as the SNP do, or as Labour did going into the general election and telling people they would not cut certain taxes and duly doing so.
But you got routed in July for having let people down. Those same people haven't forgotten that, which is why they're being driven to vote for reform now, isn't it?
Well, you know, in Scotland, we went into the general election with 6 Scottish Conservative MPs.
You can't claim that the general election was a good result for you in any way, shape or form. And you're driving people to reform now,
I think there is a silver lining to the cloud, and that is the Scottish MPs. We went out with 6 and came back with 5. By any measure, you know, you and others in the media would have probably expected a worse result than that.
But a lot of those disappointed voters have been driven to reform now, haven't they?
Well, we have seen far too many people, for my liking, voting reform. I don't know what reform stand for, especially in Scotland. They don't have a leader, they don't have any form of policies. Many of their candidates were paper candidates who had no connection to the local area, and we represent the credible alternative to this cosy socialist consensus at Holyrood. People in Scotland can see that over a decade plus, we're the only party in the Holyrood Parliament that stood up to the SNP, while far too often Labour have nodded along in agreement with them.
You must be worried about the rise of reform, though.
I'm worried about any votes that don't come to our party. It's my job as a new leader to explain to people that there is a credible alternative.
But specifically, you must be worried about reform because people are seeing them as the alternative.
I know that other parties are as worried about reform as our party is worried about reform, but I don't think they offer the solutions that people might think they do. And I think when people see more of what we are putting forward confidently, the championing of our proud Conservative values and policies, they will see that we've got the interests of ordinary, hard-working Scots at heart.
Are you worried that if they were to stand in constituencies that you hold at the Scottish Parliament election, they could cost you those seats?
Well, there's a huge amount of speculation. We don't yet know what reform are going to do in Scotland ahead of the 2026.
Every seat in Scotland at the general election.
Sure.
They beat you in every seat in Glasgow. They could cost you seats, couldn't they?
We don't know yet what they're going to do. And it may well be, as I said during my speech, they are being treated differently to any other party. They're being held to a different standard that we are held to and others. So I think they have a bit of a problem in that as the election gets closer, they will have to start to explain, as we do, who we are, what we represent, and what our policies are. And then the more people see, let's wait and see what happens.
Are you concerned that any of your current MSPs could defect to the Reform Party, particularly after your list rankings if they slip down?
Well, there's always a risk in any party where colleagues might feel disillusioned. And this is where it's my job, it's my responsibility to try and persuade people that we get it. We need to rebuild trust. It's going to be a long and difficult process. But I don't want anyone to be tempted by what would seem to be an easy fix of going elsewhere.
You said in your speech you don't like it when politicians don't admit mistakes. Just over 100 days, what mistakes have you made?
The mistakes that I've made, well, I can't think of any. If you get any you can put to me.
Well, I probably could come up with quite a few, but if you don't like politicians who don't admit their mistakes, you must know some yourself.
I'll give you one. There's one. It's not. I don't suppose it was in the past 100 days, but I have admitted in the past 100 days when people have put to me about supporting one of our former prime ministers. I was big enough to admit that was a mistake. Okay, we couldn't have foreseen some of the actions that particular politician took, but I was big enough to say that I had made a mistake, and I wondered whether people like John Swinney, who'd backed Nicola Sturgeon and Humza Yousaf for years, would do the same thing, or indeed Anas Sarwar, who has campaigned to put Jeremy Corbyn into Downing Street. Will they make the same admission?
Russel Findlay, thanks for joining us in Scotland
Thank you.
Tonight.
Cheers.